The landlord smirked as the judge entered the courtroom until the judge froze, stared at the defendants, and said 6 words that would end a career. Evelyn and Harold Carter had lived in apartment 3B for 17 years, long enough for the paint to fade and the hallway carpet to remember their footsteps. They were the kind of tenants landlords bragged about. Rent always early, no complaints, no trouble. So when the eviction notice arrived, it felt unreal. Evelyn read it twice, then a third time, her hands shaking slightly. Violation of lease, immediate removal. No explanation, no warning. Harold adjusted his glasses, confusion clouding his usually calm face. "We didn't do anything," he said softly, as if the walls were listening. Their landlord, Brent Hollis, was new slick suits, loud confidence, and a habit of calling tenants "you people." Since buying the building, he'd raised rent on several units, mostly targeting older residents who couldn't fight back. The Carters were next. When Evelyn went downstairs to ask for clarification, Brent barely looked up from his phone. "Market's changing," he said. "You don't fit anymore." "Fit what?" she asked. Brent smiled thinly. "This building is getting upgraded." Within a week, their utilities were cut. Heat first, then water, pressure tactics wrapped in paperwork. Harold called legal aid. Brent laughed when he heard. "Good luck," he said. Judges don't care about sob stories. But the Carters didn't know one thing. They weren't alone. Their son, whom they hadn't spoken about in years, had grown up watching them endure quiet indignities with grace, watching his mother swallow insults, watching his father work double shifts without complaint. And now he was a judge. The courtroom buzzed with low murmurs as Evelyn and Harold took their seats at the defendant's table. They wore their best clothes, pressed, modest, dignified. Brent Hollis strutted in minutes later, flanked by an expensive attorney. He didn't even glance their way. To him, they were already gone. He leaned over to his lawyer and whispered, "Easy win." Another couple trying to milk sympathy. When the bailiff announced the judge, everyone stood. Judge Daniel Carter entered, tall, composed, eyes sharp with discipline. He took his seat without expression. Evelyn stared straight ahead. Harold lowered his gaze. Neither recognized him at first. Years had passed. Distance does that. Brent, however, noticed something else. "The judge's last name, Carter," he whispered. "Probably coincidence." The case began. Brent's attorney painted a picture of non-compliance and lease violations, using language designed to dehumanize. He spoke fast, confident the older couple wouldn't understand half of it. When Evelyn was asked to speak, she stood slowly. "We paid our rent," she said calmly. "Every month, for 17 years." Her voice didn't crack. That was what made it powerful. Harold followed. "We just want to stay where we've lived most of our lives." Brent rolled his eyes. Then the judge leaned forward and everything changed. Judge Carter adjusted his glasses, his expression calm and unreadable. "Mr. Hollis," he said evenly, "before we proceed, I have a question." Brent smiled with confidence. "Of course, Your Honor." Instead of looking toward the landlord, the judge slowly turned his gaze to the couple seated at the defense table. "Evelyn Carter," he said carefully. "Harold Carter." The room grew suddenly quiet, as if the air itself had frozen. Evelyn finally lifted her head. Her breath caught in her throat as recognition struck her all at once. "Daniel, her son." The judge's voice tightened not with anger, but with iron control. "For the record," he said, "the defendants are my parents." The courtroom erupted into whispers, shock rippling through every row. Brent Hollis's face drained of color. The confident smile vanished as sweat beaded on his forehead, realization crashing into him like a freight train. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't an easy win. This was accountability. Judge Carter didn't smile. He didn't raise his voice or pound the gavel. Instead, he did something far more devastating. He opened the law. Judge Carter recused himself from ruling, honoring the integrity of the court, but he did not step away from the truth. The case was reassigned to another judge, yet it was far from forgotten. As proceedings continued, evidence began to surface: emails, text messages, and unmistakable patterns that revealed a calculated strategy. Brent Hollis had repeatedly targeted elderly black tenants, illegally raising rent, cutting off essential utilities, and filing false lease violations to force them out quietly. What followed was inevitable. A class action lawsuit was filed, bringing together victims from multiple properties. Housing inspectors were sent in and uncovered dozens of serious violations Brent had ignored for years. When the media caught wind, the story spread fast. Headlines exploded across the city. Landlord accused of systemic discrimination. Brent's properties were seized pending investigation. His attorney resigned. Investors fled. The building itself was placed under tenant protection, and the Carters went home. Months later, Evelyn stood on the same balcony Brent had once promised to renovate, gently watering her plants as sunlight spilled across the brick walls. Inside, Harold sat at the kitchen table reading the newspaper, a soft, peaceful smile on his face. Their apartment was safe again. Their lives had steadied. Their son visited often now, not as a judge, not in a robe, but simply as family. Brent Hollis was ultimately sentenced to heavy fines, permanent bans from housing management, and public accountability that no apology could erase. But the real punishment wasn't written in law books. He would forever be remembered as the man who tried to erase a couple and instead exposed his own corruption. Because justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it simply recognizes its own.